Little girl gave a rescue signal to a mafia boss. What he did next shocked everyone. Do you want to know? If you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. The neon pulse of Times Square blurs into a frantic smear of light as Schwarzenegger pivots. Behind him, his lieutenants stand frozen, their mouths open to protest a $1 million deal turning to ash, but one look at the boss's face silences the street. He is no longer a businessman. He is a predator who has spotted a blight on his territory. He moves. He doesn't run a man of his stature. Running creates a panic. He simply flows through the crowd like a shark in dark water, the sea of tourists parting instinctively before his massive, inked frame. Up ahead, the man, Derek Miller, has tightened his grip on Kay's shoulder. He feels the shift in the atmosphere. He doesn't know who is behind him, but he knows the air has turned cold. Miller reaches the mouth of the 42nd Street subway entrance, a concrete throat ready to swallow them into the subterranean dark. He shoves Kay forward, her small blue dress fluttering like a trapped bird's wings against the grime of the railing. Miller glances back, his eyes darting, searching for the threat he can feel but can't yet see. Schwarzenegger watches him from 20 paces, his gaze locked on the way Miller's fingers dig into the girl's collarbone. A memory, jagged and unhealed, claws at the back of the boss's mind, a sister's hand he failed to grab 20 years ago. The world narrows. The honking taxis and the digital screams of the billboards fade into a low hum. There is only the girl, the signal she sent, and the man who thinks he's found an exit. Miller descends the stairs, dragging Kay into the humid, trash-scented heat of the tunnels. He thinks the transit system is a maze he can use to vanish. He doesn't realize that in this city, every shadow, every tunnel, and every third person on a platform answers to the man now looming at the top of the stairs. Schwarzenegger steps into the stairwell, his heavy boots silent on the concrete. He watches Miller pull the girl toward the edge of the platform as the distant thunder of an approaching train begins to vibrate through the floor. The scream of the metal wheels on the track rises, masking the sound of Schwarzenegger's closing stride. Miller looks at the tunnel, waiting for the lights of the Q train to break the dark, a smirk of relief twitching on his face. He thinks he's safe. He thinks he's won. He doesn't feel the massive shadow looming directly behind him until the cold, tattooed hand of Schwarzenegger clamps down on his wrist with the force of a hydraulic press. "You're getting off at the wrong stop," Schwarzenegger's voice rumbles beneath the roar of the incoming train. The wind from the tunnel whips Kay's hair across her face as she looks up, her eyes wide with a terrifying hope. But as the train screeches to a halt, Miller doesn't pull away. He leans in, a hidden blade flashing in the dim fluorescent light. The train's mechanical shriek acts as a curtain, muffling the scuffle as Schwarzenegger yanks Miller away from the platform edge and into the damp, lightless maintenance corridor that leads back to the surface. Miller's blade catches a sliver of fluorescent light, a jagged tooth of steel intended for a silent kill, but Schwarzenegger doesn't flinch. He is a man who has lived among wolves. He knows that the most dangerous weapon in the room isn't the knife, it's the intent behind it. With a violent practiced twist, he slams Miller against the ancient, weeping brickwork of the alley behind the theater district. "Get away from us! Someone help!" Miller screams, his voice cracking with a high-pitched, rehearsed desperation. He pulls Kay closer, wrapping a defensive arm around her neck in a mock embrace that looks like protection but feels like a chokehold. "I'm her father. This freak is trying to kidnap my daughter." For a split second, the performance is perfect. Miller's eyes are wide, glassy with artificial terror, the image of a suburban father pushed to the brink. But Schwarzenegger's hyper-awareness, honed by decades of identifying the tell before the hit, dissects the lie in real time. He sees the way Miller's thumb remains tucked into his fist rather than spread across Kay's shoulder. He hears the lack of a rhythmic sob in the girl's chest. She isn't crying. She is holding her breath, waiting for the impact. Most damning of all, he smells the sterile, chemical scent of medical adhesive on Miller's skin, not the soap and sweat of a family. "You have the eyes of a man who eats his own," Schwarzenegger rumbles, stepping into Miller's personal space, the sheer mass of his tattooed neck casting a shadow that swallows the predator whole. Miller's face shifts. The mask of the worried father melts, replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. He realizes the crowd isn't coming. The theater alley is a dead zone, and the man in front of him is the apex. He tightens his grip on the blade, the tip now pressing into the blue fabric of Kay's dress, right over her heart. One more step, inked up freak, and we both find out what color she bleeds, Miller hisses, his voice dropping an octave into a guttural snarl. Schwarzenegger stops. His heart, usually a stone in his chest, thuds with a phantom pain. He sees Kay's eyes, the same blue as the signal she sent locked onto his. She doesn't ask for mercy. She asks for a miracle. Schwarzenegger slowly raises his empty hands, but his fingers aren't in a gesture of surrender. He reaches for his inner pocket, not for a gun, but for the one thing Miller never expected him to have. "I'm not going to kill you, Derek," Schwarzenegger says, the name hitting Miller like a physical blow. "I'm going to make you wish I did." He pulls out a heavy, encrypted burner phone and presses a single button. As the line connects, the distant wail of a siren begins to rise, but it's coming from the wrong direction. The siren's wail draws closer, bouncing off the damp brick walls like a physical weight, but the air between the three of them is stiflingly thin. Derek Miller's blade trembles against the blue silk of the dress, his control fracturing under the heavy pressure of Schwarzenegger's unflinching gaze. The predator is cornered, his father act discarded like a used skin, leaving behind a desperate, cornered animal. Schwarzenegger leans in, his voice dropping to a register that vibrates in the girl's bones. The man on the phone is listening, and the cops are 2 blocks out. He says, eyes locked on Kay, "If you don't speak now, the world keeps believing his lie. Tell me who you are." A sharp, jagged silence follows. Miller's grip tightens on Kay's throat, a warning, but the spark in her eyes has turned from a flicker to a flame. She draws a breath that shudders with the weight of months of forced silence. "I'm not his," she whispers, the words small but cutting through the dark like a blade. "My name is Kay Mitchell. I live in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on Pine Street. He took me from the park near my school." The confession hits the alley like an electric shock. The fake father's identity shatters completely. The emotional shift in Schwarzenegger is instantaneous and terrifying. The icy calculation of a mob boss evaporates, replaced by the primal fury of a man who realizes he is the last line of defense between an innocent soul and an abyss. He sees not just a girl, but the life she was stolen from the Pine Street that doesn't exist in Miller's sterile world of shadows. Miller's face twists, his eyes darting to the end of the alley where blue and red lights begin to pulse against the wet pavement. He knows the game is up, but a predator's final act is always the most vicious. "Fine," Miller hisses, pressing the knife harder. "If I'm going down, I'm taking the only thing you care about with me." He pulls back to strike, but Schwarzenegger doesn't go for his gun. He moves with a speed that defies his massive frame, stepping into the arc of the knife to shield Kay with his own body. The steel bites, but Schwarzenegger's expression doesn't change. He isn't protecting his property anymore. He is protecting a life that is worth more than his entire empire. As he pins Miller against the brick with one hand, he reaches for the burner phone with the other. "Captain," he rumbles into the line, his blood staining his black polo. The package is identified. It's Kay Mitchell, and the man holding her. Make sure the transport takes the long route. The alley fills with the glare of headlights, but the real threat to Miller isn't the police, it's the massive, bleeding man who refuses to let go of his wrist. The sirens are screaming now, a wall of discord that should force a professional hitman to vanish. But Schwarzenegger remains planted like an oak, his hand clamped on Miller's wrist with a grip that promises the slow snapping of bone. Blood from the knife wound in his side begins to map a dark, glistening geography across his black polo, but his pulse doesn't quicken. He doesn't look like a mob boss anymore. He looks like a god of the threshold, judging who is worthy of passing through. Miller sneers, eyes darting to the blue and red glare, reflecting off the damp brick. "Go ahead, inked-up freak. Call your lawyers. By tomorrow, I'm a technicality, and you're the monster who assaulted a father in an alley. I know how the system works." Schwarzenegger doesn't respond with a blow. He reaches into his inner pocket, ignoring the searing heat in his ribs, and pulls out the encrypted burner phone. He isn't calling a fixer or a cleanup crew. He dials a number that exists in no official directory. "Captain," Schwarzenegger rumbles when the line clicks open. The voice on the other end is guarded, the sound of a man who owes a debt he never wanted. "I'm burning the favor, all of it. From the 2012 dock raid to the offshore accounts. It's all gone for this one." On the other side of the alley, the flashing lights stop. A high-ranking precinct captain steps from the lead cruiser, adjusting his cap, eyes locking onto the massive man he's ignored for a decade. The deal is unspoken, broadcast through the heavy New York air. The syndicate is stepping back so the law can move in, but not the law that Miller expects. Schwarzenegger leans down, his face inches from Miller's, his breath cold and steady. "I could have ended you in 5 seconds," he whispers, the ink on his neck seeming to writhe in the strobe light. "But that would be a mercy. Instead, I've just bought you a seat in a cage with men who have nothing left to lose but their hatred for predators like you." He releases Miller's wrist. The kidnapper stumbles back, his mock father facade finally dissolving into a puddle of raw, pathetic fear. The police swarm him, not with the gentle handling of a suspect, but with the hard efficiency of men who have been told exactly who he is. Schwarzenegger turns his back on the chaos, his side burning as he looks down at Kay. For the first time, his granite expression cracks. He doesn't touch her, he knows his hands carry too much history, but he nods once, a silent affirmation that the world is right again. "Go with the men in blue, Kay," he says softly. Pine Street is waiting. As the captain approaches, hand on his holster and a look of resigned horror on his face, Schwarzenegger feels the weight of the phone in his hand. He's just dismantled a decade of political protection for a girl he didn't know 10 minutes ago. But as he watches Miller drag toward the back of a wagon, he knows the real trial is about to begin. Miller thinks he's going to a cell, but he doesn't realize the transport van just changed its route. The blue and red strobes turn the alley into a rhythmic nightmare of jagged light and devouring shadow. Derek Miller is forced onto his knees, his face pressed against the cold, grease-slicked brick as the heavy weight of the NYPD pins him down. Schwarzenegger looms over the arrest like a monolith, his own blood dripping rhythmically onto the pavement, a dark clock ticking away the silence of the city. He isn't watching the police, he is watching the phone Miller tried to ditch the small plastic vault that holds the digitized ghosts of a dozen stolen lives. The evidence is in the cloud folder under the library alias, Schwarzenegger rumbles, directed at the captain, but his eyes never leave Miller's. The predator struggles, a muffled protest dying in his throat as a detective retrieves the device. The officer's face pales in the LCD glow. The evidence isn't just there, it's a mapping of depravity that turns the officer's stomach. The system that Miller hoped to manipulate is already closing its jaws, fueled by the digital trail Schwarzenegger's technicians have pulled into the light. As the officers haul Miller up, his mask of suburban normalcy is gone, replaced by the sweat-soaked panic of a man who sees the trap snapping shut. Schwarzenegger steps into the line of transport, forcing the officers to halt for a heartbeat. The sheer gravitational pull of his presence makes the alley grow cold. He leans into Miller's ear, the heavy scent of copper and rain following him. "You're not going to a protective wing, Derek," Schwarzenegger whispers, the words vibrating like a funeral bell. "I've burned my last favor to ensure your files arrive an hour before you do. In the system, they love to meet men like you. They have special ways of welcoming those who hurt children. I've made sure they're waiting behind the red door." Miller's breath hitches a sharp, rattling sound of genuine terror. For the first time, he looks at the massive, tattooed man and sees something far more frightening than the law. He sees the architect of his damnation. The police shove Miller into the back of the steel-caged wagon, the heavy doors slamming shut with a finality that echoes through the narrow passage. Schwarzenegger watches the van pull away, its tires splashing through the rain. He doesn't feel the victory. He only feels the weight of the girl who is still standing by the cruiser, clutching a blue dress that will never be clean enough again. He looks at his hands, slick with his own blood, and realizes the monster of New York has just saved the only thing worth saving in this entire city. But as the captain approaches to take his statement, Schwarzenegger sees a black sedan at the end of the alley that doesn't belong to the precinct, a silent reminder that the mafia doesn't forgive a boss who burns his ledger for a stranger. The seasons change in New York, with a violence of their own, the biting winter air scrubbing the streets of the summer's heavy grime. The neon signs of Times Square are a world away from this quiet corner of New Jersey, where the only sound is the rhythmic chirp of a crossing signal. Schwarzenegger sits in the back of a black SUV, the engine idling in a low, predatory hum that blends into the suburban morning. His side aches where the knife once bit, a phantom pressure that reminds him of the night the monster broke his own rules. He watches through the tinted glass as the school bus hisses to a stop. Among the swarms of children, he sees her. Kay Mitchell doesn't walk with that mechanical stiffness anymore. She moves with the light, chaotic energy of a girl who knows she belongs to the sidewalk under her feet. Her blue dress has been replaced by a heavy wool coat, but as she turns to adjust her backpack, Schwarzenegger's breath hitches in the dim cabin. Hanging from the zipper is a small, intricate guardian's knot, tied from the silk of a blue sash, the same blue as the dress she wore when she looked into his soul and asked to be saved. It is a silent signal of a different kind. It is a debt acknowledged, a secret shared between the girl who survived and the man who chose to be her shield. Beside him, his new lieutenant checks his watch, eyes flicking nervously to the black sedan idling a block away, the silent, ever-present shadow of the syndicate that still demands an accounting for the favor he burned. "Boss," the man whispers, "we have to go. The council is waiting. They want to know why the ledgers were turned over to the feds with Miller's evidence." Schwarzenegger doesn't look away from Kay. He watches her reach the other side of the street, pausing to look back at the quiet black SUV as if she can see through the dark glass to the eyes of the man who gave her Pine Street back. She doesn't wave, but she touches the blue knot on her bag, her fingers lingering for a second before she disappears into the warmth of the school. "Let them wait," Schwarzenegger rumbles, his voice like grinding tectonic plates. He knows he is a dead man walking, that the Mafia doesn't leave loose ends, and that he has traded his empire for a single school morning. He reaches out and touches the cold window where Kay was just standing, his tattooed hand trembling almost imperceptibly. He had saved her, and in the process, he had found the only scrap of his own humanity worth dying for. As the SUV pulls away, accelerating toward a city that will eventually devour him, he catches one last glimpse of her in the rearview mirror. But as they turn the corner, the black sedan behind them swerves to follow, and the click of a hammer cocking back inside the cabin echoes like a final heartbeat. Thank you for watching to the end. I believe you enjoyed it. We have a lot of other interesting stories like this lined up for you already, so click the image showing on your screen to watch the next. Don't forget to subscribe.